Hey YouTube, Joeboy here. So, been a little while since we've done one of these, but you guys know how we do the video. Talk about the official translation, compare it to the fan translation, note any difference, talk about literally anything at all, and then get into comments from you guys. I can't promise you that I will do a comments video next week, but after the last chapter, okay, this was a comments video chapter, I had to. Not that anybody is complaining. And actually, we're going to start this video off with a comment because I saw this in my comment section. Huge shout out to Saeed, who I've known for a long time, been in the community for a long time, and as far as I'm aware, has recently taken it upon himself to essentially do the comparison between the official and the fan translation over the past few months. Bro has basically made me irrelevant. Not that I was ever very good at this. This is actually his translation versus fan translation. We'll talk a little bit about the official as well. I'm taking his word for this because I trust him. But if he's wrong, that's totally on him and has nothing to do with me. I'm guilt-free, conscience-free. Okay, let's read it. There are 3 inaccuracies in the fan translation. One of them is when Kaido talked about rebuilding the castle. The more accurate one is rebuild it, huh? It took 5 years to build it though, man. There doesn't seem to be here too much difference between what the fan translation gave us, but Kaido was definitely more affirmative in the length it took to build Onigashima. There was no question. The second one is the conversation between the 5 Elder Stars, Gorosei. They didn't mention that nuisance. They said, if it's a battle with Kaido and Big Mom, it's not unnatural for someone to die. They should be erased. And also in the official translation here, they used a word that's kind of interchangeable sort of with nuisance. The official said when Kaido and Big Mom are involved in a fight, death could come easily for anyone, which makes it the perfect cover to eliminate inconveniences. Inconvenience, nuisance, similar. But I like that Saeed is addressing this nuisance comment because I think that by nature it kind of directs your thoughts. Like, who would the Gorosei consider to be a nuisance? What kind of character would you imagine when they talk about nuisance? It directs your thoughts in a particular way, like Luffy or X-Drake. I kind of imagine a character who has been a thorn in the Gorosei's side, almost like someone who has actively been a problem for them. That's the way I feel anyway, because I receive a lot of comments, or at least some comments basically saying that, you know, it can't be Robin that they're talking about because of the word nuisance. But based on the way that Saeed has translated this, overall the tone of it is a lot more neutral. I also find the official translation's word of inconvenience also a bit more neutral than nuisance. It's actually worth discussing this a little bit further. When I read this during the fan translation, I basically said, hey, I'm going to wait for the official translation to see if it sheds light on or offers clues as to who exactly they're talking about. Because it isn't outright stated. The only real clue that we have is the line before talking about Robin, but it isn't confirmed that they're talking about Robin. Well, the official translation didn't help me out, so clearly this was meant to be some kind of mystery or inconclusive, and so we're basically left where we are, where I think, because they were talking about Robin, then they were talking about someone dying during the war, and we should erase this person, I think it's Robin, but it doesn't have to be. Most people who disagreed with me said, well, they already captured Robin, so why would they kill her? Well, the point is that if you capture Robin, then you have to have a whole event, basically a trial for her. An opportunity potentially to rescue her or for enemies to try to capture her. So they're basically saying, hey, we don't need to hold a trial for this. We can just kill her and blame it on Kaido and Big Mom. That's how that makes sense to me. But for those people who do disagree, they think that the Gorosei are talking about characters like X-Drake or Who's Who, which also makes sense. And in fact, it doesn't have to be just Robin, right? They could be referring to a lot of characters at the same time, and that would fit just fine. Anyway, back to Saeed. The third one is the last line. This is my translation of it. Then why did the world government go to the trouble to deliberately give that devil fruit another name? To erase that fruit's name from history, right? Honestly, I think that the fan translation here at the end was just kind of a mess. In terms of, I think that it's very slight variations in how this is worded that makes it make less sense somehow. Here's how the official translated it. No, that's impossible. That fruit is only a legend now, even to us. It has not awakened for centuries upon centuries. Then why would the world government bother to give that one specific devil fruit another name? It's to erase that fruit's name from the annals of history, isn't it? So Saeed's translation and the official here are very comparable. I don't want to read the fan translation because I feel like the words would just start to blend together, but there's a difference. Mainly in how the sentence is structured so that it feels like it makes sense. But overall, I found these differences to be a bit nitpicky in the sense that you read the official translation, you read the fan translation, you pretty much get the same thing. It really doesn't change my thoughts at all from my first reaction, sort of how I interpreted it and the lines that I added beforehand to make the whole dialogue sort of come together and feel like something's being said. But yeah, thanks Saeed for that. Let's get into regular comments. This one was by far my favorite and the most upvoted comment on my comment section, so I'm just going to read this whole thing because a great argument is being made. I have a different thought about the devil fruit that they're talking about. If you look at the panel closely, you will understand that the agent in the ship was not talking to the Gorosei. It's obvious that he was talking to the other ship, which I agree with. What the 5 elders are talking about has to be a devil fruit that is present right now in Wano and made huge news for them. In that case, if you take a closer look at all the devil fruits that we've seen there, the only devil fruit that could be forgotten is Toki's. Orochi in his speech explained that she's a witch, and she used her powers to send Momonosuke into the future. Think about it this way, she is from the Void Century. She is the only user of that fruit and she went forward in time, which means that even if they heard about it during the Void Century, it really fits the description of a legend because they've never really seen the user. All the other fruits are known to them. Why would they be surprised and call them legendary? Plus, I don't think awakened here is referring to power. Instead, it's referring to the usage instead, like a sleeping beast that's been awakened. Does that make sense to you? It does make sense. Obviously, when you have a fruit that has not actually been existent in the world and transferred users over a period of 900 years, I mean, that's a legendary fruit, right? Especially if it was noteworthy from the time of the Void Century. We don't know that currently, but knowing the fruit, is it possible? Absolutely. I think the biggest bit of evidence that this person added that substantiate this is the fact that Orochi talked about Toki using her abilities, talked about the fruit publicly. We know that Cypherpool is there and potentially other agents as well. So this is how the Gorosei could come about this news of this devil fruit, which without this, I'm not sure if they would know. But as an idea, it absolutely fits. I have really 2 issues with this, 2 issues which may mean absolutely nothing at all. The first one I kind of voiced in my first reaction is that Toki's devil fruit doesn't seem to have any tie to Zunisha that we are aware of. And so it was kind of intermixed with this reveal of Zunisha being there. This is a bit too much dishonesty from an author for my taste. Whether that's too much dishonesty in Oda's opinion, I mean, we will find out. If he chooses Toki, then that's what it is. But it'll still be like, come on, man. Like, you couldn't have found a devil fruit to relate this to the reveal that's going on in the chapter. That's how I would feel, honestly. My other issue with this theory is the actual application of the fruit, which would make it a fruit to be feared, worthy of being erased from history. That's difficult for me to imagine with Toki's fruit without adding powers that I don't think are there, but they could be. As far as we are aware, Toki's ability doesn't give her control over time. You can't go backwards, so you can't change history, and you're not immortal. You jump forward to a period in time somewhere randomly or where you are but in the future, and you possess the knowledge of the past, but that's really the greatest strength of the fruit, right? That you in the Gorosei erase history and you come from that time period that was erased, so you can carry that news of that potentially. But otherwise, I don't really see how it really changes anything because it doesn't individually make you absurdly strong. Unless you want to speculate that the fruit is used in a way that I really don't think Oda would ever want to, which is basically like, well, let's say Luffy has the fruit just for shits and giggles and is fighting Kaido and is like, you know what, we're losing this battle, let's blip Kaido 20 years in the future, right? Like, I hope that the fruit is never and has never been used in that way, and if I were Oda, I would just run away from that thought, even if it's possible. A way in which maybe this could make more sense, but I think is insanely overpowered, is like, what if, the ancient kingdom disappeared from history, right? The kingdom lost, right? Well, what if the entire island and everybody on it, or all of its people, we're blipped 900 years into the future. So we're just waiting for this civilization to reappear in the present time. And that will be the return of Joy Boy, right? Like, you could say that and that would make some sense, but that's also like, whoa, insanely overpowered. But I could see an argument as to why the world government would erase this fruit's existence from history if they knew that was how the ancient kingdom survived or something. But those are really my issues, and as I said, they could amount to overthinking and bias on my part. So if this is the answer, if this is the fruit, I'm curious as to the logic that Oda has to sort of explain its role in the past and why the fruit is so feared. Next comment, what if the thing Blackbeard went after is Germa? He said that they need to have it first versus the Marines. Well, he's got Moria now. What if his plan by killing Absalom is to lure Moria out and recruit him because of his powers? He could put souls in Germa soldiers, you know? This is an interesting out-of-the-box sort of thinking, that Blackbeard would see the value of Germa or their tech and see some use for it. I mean, absolutely it's possible. I like to think of Blackbeard as pretty much the most competent person in terms of planning in the entire series. That is, Blackbeard waited forever so that he could get the exact right fruit that he thought that he needed in order to even start his whole plan. We see in Marineford, right, Blackbeard is 2 steps ahead of everybody. He's going to Impel Down, taking advantage of the execution of Ace, which he initiated. I mean, Blackbeard is just on it. I think that he knows by capturing Ace that it's going to lure Whitebeard out, cause a great war in the first place. He knew that was going to happen. That was logical thinking. He then appeared in the battle itself, taking advantage of Whitebeard's weakness and the current battle to take Whitebeard's fruit, which he also accomplished. I mean, Blackbeard is insanely impressive. And so when Big Mom sees Germa and thinks to herself, if I get Germa, then it'll help me become the Pirate Queen, then if that's true, right, then Blackbeard would see that possibility as well, even if we don't know exactly how he might apply that. But to your thought of Blackbeard purposely but to your thought about Blackbeard setting up Moria, basically I think that he encountered Absalom as Absalom was spying, but then from that point maybe turned that into a plan to lure out Moria because he had a particular use for Moria's fruit or Moria himself. Seems very possible to me. I mean, I would look at everything Blackbeard does and think, man, that dude has thought about it. But I don't really think that it's intuitive to add Germa clones and shadows because the clones are actually alive already. So, I mean, the shadows might make them stronger, but that's a willpower thing. So I'm not really there with you there. But I would say that both of these powers have the potential of vastly increasing your manpower. We see this with Kaido, right? Kaido's crew is enormous. He's recruiting all these people. The size of his crew is incredible. The same is true of Big Mom. And when I think about Luffy, in-game Luffy, I think the same thing, that his Grand Fleet, all the allied ships, and all the countries that are loyal to him, the Straw Hats will have incredible manpower at the end of the story. And both of these things could be Blackbeard's way of obtaining the same thing and loyalty without having to earn it by being the good guy or by saving people or being friends with anybody. Zombies and clones that he controls. So taking your idea that Blackbeard sees a chance here of taking Germa Tech after Big Mom has failed, this is how I personally would argue it. Next comment, why I believe that Momo does not need his Devil Fruit to command Zunisha. Poseidon is a hereditary trait that Shirahoshi inherited from her mother, which skipped generations and is capable of commanding the Sea Kings. Toki was lost in time since the Void Century. Uranus, Pluton's power, may as well be inherited by Momonosuke from his mother, and before him, no one would have manifested that power since maybe Toki's parents, and Toki has been traveling over time, making the power a legend even to the Gorosei because it was lost in time. Again here, this would be, if this is true, very good sleight of hand from Oda because he's definitely setting up recently the expectation that Momo's ability over Zunisha is probably related to the fact that his artificial Devil Fruit, which was deemed a failure, is very clearly not a failure. It is the same fruit of Kaido being hyped up. I think what Oda wants us to conclude is that Zunisha is related to dragons. That's just how I see it. That feels like the most straightforward thought. So then the about face here, the turn of expectations is that was all a red herring, because, and it's still true, but it's red herring because the reason why Momonosuke can control Zunisha is not the Dragon Devil Fruit, it is because of Momonosuke and his lineage. I've seen other ideas as well, as it's not just about Momonosuke's lineage, it's a combination of his lineage and the artificial Dragon Devil Fruit. That's what makes him different from Kaido. This is still totally plausible, but like I sort of suggested here, I think that it's out of the box, which doesn't make it necessarily less likely, but you have to argue it a bit. I think that if you told most people right now that Momonosuke is special, not his Devil Fruit, that he has an ability similar to Poseidon because of his lineage, I think that that's a tougher sell. But to finish the comment here, he basically brings up Momonosuke looking at the logbook and his comment that he shouldn't die here, or that he can't die here. And maybe that there's something in the logbook about his powers, maybe his conversation to Zunisha, something about that which indicates his importance and why he asked Shinobu to age him, which, I mean, makes sense. Next comment, a quote of me from my first reaction. He tried to capture a lion dog, talking about Kaido. If he had the fruit awakened, Kaido wouldn't need to capture the animal, now would he? He could just command it. This is based on my theory, basically, that Kaido's Dragon Devil Fruit is the ultimate creature Devil Fruit, which awakened gives one the ability to command other creatures, similar to the ability Momo showed at the end of Zou with Zunisha. He goes on to say, why spend time capturing animals when you can just go into your dragon mode and shout a command over the hull of Wano? Well, my main argument from the video, I guess, is that Kaido hasn't awakened his Devil Fruit. And so I think reasonably some people can have issues with that. Why would Momonosuke potentially be awakened before Kaido? And this leads into the other comments of like, well, maybe Momo's heritage is important with the Devil Fruit. Maybe a combination of that makes Momo special, more special than Kaido. Like as just an example, the previous user of the Dragon Devil Fruit from the Void Century, the one who initially ordered Zunisha to walk the world forever, was a Kozuki dragon user, and so Kaido is not a Kozuki, so it requires both being a Kozuki and also the Dragon Devil Fruit to break Zunisha's command. You can then also potentially argue that while Momonosuke could break Zunisha's command, he couldn't issue a new one, which would be the actual power, and Kaido just simply hasn't encountered Zou in order to break her command or know about that. So Kaido could also break Zunisha's command, but also wouldn't be able to issue a new one, which is really the power that is truly terrifying. I know a lot of this is a bit of a reach because of lack of evidence, but basically my truth is that Momonosuke is important, related to Zou, probably an ancient weapon, so from there you just kind of have to fill in the blanks as best as you can until Oda tells you what the hell's going on. But basically the argument is that Kaido's not awakened yet, but he knows what the fruit is capable of. So he collects various creatures and such because, and he wants to master the fruit. And maybe all of his interest in dying or coming close to dying, battles and such, is also because he wants to reach the next level with his fruit and bring out its potential. The comment goes on a little bit beyond this, but I think that this really addressed the main issue with it, and so the conversation from that point changes a bit. Next comment, I enjoy you talk about Kaido and his ability to control other people, animals, but literally everything you said can apply to Tama too. I mean, it's the truth. As much as I want this ability to be special and unique and an ancient weapon, I mean, Tama's here. And so, I mean, I can argue that Tama's ability is a lesser version of what I imagine that this ability is, that is an ancient weapon, but at the same time, Tama's here, and I think her existence and the fruit, it steals thunder. It makes you ask questions. It makes you doubt the importance of Momonosuke's ability. If Tama fed a Kibidengo to Zunisha, what would happen? Obviously, you could imagine like, oh, well, Zunisha is a great creature, so her ability doesn't work, but that's kind of an author ass-pull, is what that is. Based on everything that we know right now, Zunisha being a creature, Tama gives Zunisha a Kibidengo, and then Zunisha is just Tama's slave, basically. So just by me saying it that way, right, it immediately takes away some cool factor, some important factor from Momonosuke. No amount of words that I could say will change that. This is just where it's tough to be a theory channel, right? Because I want the Dragon Devil Fruit to be special in some way. And, you know, because of it's been hyped up in this particular way, there's a lot of clues, potentially red herrings that set this up. And so you look for the ways in which that's true, and the way that I come to is just turns out to be similar to another devil fruit that Oda has included in this arc. So am I reading it wrong? Potentially. Am I falling into the trap? A theory that you could potentially come to, which also makes some sense, and I think I've mentioned this before, but I don't think I've made an actual theory video about it because basically I don't want it, but, you know, we don't say that. But, you know, it's like Tama, or the previous user of Tama's fruit from the Void Century, fed a Kibidango to Zunisha and gave her a command that you should only listen to a member of the Kozuki family, right? And then so Momonosuke isn't special at all. That ability that he showed to Zunisha is not actually his ability. It's because of the particular command Zunisha was given by somebody who had Tama's fruit. Makes sense, right? Tama is an ancient weapon confirmed. But yeah, for aesthetic reasons at this point, I'm not a huge fan of it, just because of what the devil fruit is. It's not as cool as the dragon. That's basically the best way that I can explain that. But for thematic reasons, it could be fitting, you know, because I like to imagine the Ancient Kingdom as a kingdom of peace-made pirates, basically pirates like Luffy, so their weapon would be giving food to things to make them your friend. It does fit. But I would absolutely want Tama's ability to have a little bit more free will. I like to believe that's true currently. It basically changes the minds of the people that eat it so that they like Tama. Tama is their friend now. But when push comes to shove, they have the free will to decide things on their own. That's how I prefer the fruit to be, but that may not be how the fruit is. So we'll see. Next comment, I'm confused. Was it confirmed that Zunisha is female? Look, man, I just call Zunisha a girl because I don't want to call it an it. Zunisha has that A feminine sort of ending to it, so I've always just imagined that Zunisha is a girl because that just seems to me to be a girl name. Now, culturally, I'm sure people will tell me that it's probably not, or that it's gender ambiguous or something like that, but I mean, I'm not calling it an it, so you have to choose, and I choose female, so that's what it is. Next comment, JB, there's so much going on in this chapter. The most interesting thing said keeps getting overlooked by everyone. I hope the official translation sheds some light on what it means, but the Gorosei, talking about the fruit being a legend, says, even to us, which is also said in the official. That little add to the sentence that could have simply not been there or worded in a more clear manner was seemingly put there as a clue to something. Did the Gorosei get operated on by previous owners of the Opi Opi no Mi and thus have unnaturally long lives? It could explain their being separate from the celestial dragons and could make for some really awesome storytelling in the future. So this was an incredibly popular theory for years, that the Gorosei were immortal or have existed from the time of the Void Century, that they don't age. I don't believe in this theory anymore. But if it happened, you would never, ever see me complain about it because, yes. In fact, I would almost argue the opposite. Like, the fruit is a legend even to us. If they're from the Void Century, then it wouldn't be a legend because they would know about it. I suppose here you're really just saying that maybe they're older than they appear to be. Maybe not from the Void Century, but hundreds of years old. I don't know. If I was Oda, I'd just go all the way. But overall, the big takeaway from this inclusion is basically that the Gorosei know some things. Like, they know a lot of things. They're surprised that this thing has returned because among all the things that they know, this was even a legend to them. Things like One Piece and all this other stuff, no, but this is. So, makes it special. It makes you wonder all the things that the Gorosei know and potentially other things that they may not. Next comment, I don't understand why people think Pluton is a person or a fruit when the shipwrights pass the specific blueprints of Pluton down all the way to Tom and Iceberg as a countermeasure to the world government. Then Frankie had those blueprints and even burned them. It's not a person in my opinion. It's something that can be built, and if anyone will build it, it's Frankie. This is where you get into conspiracy theory territory. Now, what you've said here is what the vast majority of people from the time that I joined the community for years and years believed. And I was one of the first people, if not the first person, somewhere along there, to start making the argument that the Pluton that the Frankie family had, or the blueprints, was not to make the Pluton. It was to make a thing that is supposed to counter the Pluton. I'm not going to pull up all the panels here in the comments video, but basically Pluton, the blueprints, was to create the counter Pluton, or a countermeasure in the case that the Pluton was found. I think that Oda was being purposefully deceptive about all of this in Water 7, but when you parse the wording, the specific wording that he uses time and again, it's repeated that the blueprints were the countermeasure in case the Pluton was found. If the Pluton falls into the wrong hands, you are to build this. I think that Iceberg said that he believed it to be the Pluton, and the world government believed it to be the Pluton, or I should say that Spandam thought that, but it doesn't make it true. Spandam actually has a conversation with the Gorosei, and they seem kind of dismissive, honestly, of the whole deal, which in my opinion adds evidence to the idea that, that wasn't the actual Pluton. It's not rebuilding the Pluton. But anyway, I would say that the main conspiracy theory here is that the people who passed down the blueprints of the Pluton believe it to be Pluton, but it is actually not. The true history of it all has been lost. And so what Iceberg takes as truth and shares as truth when he reveals the Pluton is actually conjecture. All they really know is that they have blueprints which have the name Pluton on it, and they assume it to be the Pluton, and they assume that the blueprints are meant to recreate it. But, the popular theory now is that Zunisha is Pluton, but then you could sort of fill in the gaps here, where Zunisha or other giant creatures like that are actually considered ships and were the ancient weapon, and these blueprints were created to create an actual ship that you would build to be able to kill one of those things. Which makes a lot of sense. And it also makes a lot of sense why the actual reality of what Pluton was would be lost to history. But basically what I'm saying is keep an open mind. I think that there's room here for Pluton to be something other than a ship. It may just be a ship, and the art of theory crafting is usually involves overthinking to a bit. That might be present here. But at the same time, when you're talking about other crazy reveals in One Piece, it, requires you to do things like this. So there's room here. Next comment, the new anime intro goes along with the theory of people coming back to life, or ghost piece. Swords raining down onto Wano. The swords were buried with their dead users and now rained down from the sky, specifically the moon. Onigashima also was shown alive. Another thing that this person doesn't bring up is there's also in the anime intro a translucent Odin that is superimposed over the moon that Kaido is trying to eat, but it is like ghost Odin in the intro. That's also a thing. Part of me doesn't even want to bring these up because the fact that these sorts of hints exist within anime openings for people who are not even caught up with the manga, obviously I guess that they might get less out of it than we would, but I don't want to be spoiled in the freaking anime opening. Come on. However, it has been proven over an extended period of time that the anime people are given their slip notes, and anime openings have been notorious for not only straight up revealing things that the anime people have yet to see, but also things related to manga reveals that hasn't happened. So these are interesting, right? So there's these swords coming down from the moon. He speculates that the sword referred to dead people because the swords were buried with their users in Ringo. And basically it's like the wills of the dead warriors coming down to the Battle of Onigashima. That's the metaphorical interpretation of this, which I totally buy. It doesn't have to be true, but I buy it. I'm almost constantly reminded of this line from Kawamatsu, which sort of adds to this theory. He says, in battle, when your companion dies before your eyes, you take his sword and continue onward. The soul that resides in that katana makes a samurai strong and enables him to destroy his enemies. As a side note here, I think that you should be reminded of Enma and how Enma has been acting strange recently, reacting to Hiyori's song. This is still a battlefield. The battle between the Animal Kingdom pirates, or the Beast Pirates, and the land of Wano is not yet finished. It is too early to let these swords sleep. So with these panels in mind, and you see the anime intro where the swords are falling from the moon, I presume the moon represents Kozuki because that's what Kozuki means. You can then imagine that the swords represent the fallen people in battle and their swords having souls that when picked up again make the people currently fighting stronger. So it represents the souls of the dead, basically. The souls of the dead are literally helping in the battle. But you know, the most interesting thing that this comment brought up, that I'm not sure if it relates to Ghost Piece or not, but I really hope that it does, but I really don't know, is in the anime intro, the skull of Onigashima seems to move, like the head creeps forward and the mouth opens. That's the visual effect that you see. If that's some kind of tease or foreshadowing or spoiler, I kind of hope that's not, but at the same time, having seen it, I really hope that something like that actually happens. Like, what if the soul of the creature of Oars appears and inhabits? I don't know. But this was a thing that is worthy of pointing out. And finally, we have the last comment. Personally, I feel like it would make the most sense for it to be Luffy's fruit that they are talking about. I mean, it was stolen from the world government. Luffy has had it for years and still hasn't awakened it. But with all the awakenings happening in this arc, I think it's safe to assume he is about to awaken his. His fruit has been mentioned in this arc already and has significance added to it. It's not like usual devil fruits and how Luffy utilizes it, and the list honestly goes on. Plus, considering Kaido has been a Yonko and prominent pirate for decades, it wouldn't make sense for them to just now bring up his fruit, considering they've already cloned and researched it, and they don't know about Tama, so her fruit is unknown to them as well. Look, I told you in my first reaction that I wouldn't dismiss many ideas, if any, at the end of this chapter. And you might have shrugged that off and saying, oh, JP's just saying that, but this is another theory that I would not dismiss, because a very persuasive argument can be made that this is what's going on. A lot of interesting things have been happening with Luffy in this arc. They've already brought up his fruit's importance. Shanks stole it. World government had some sort of interest in it. It hasn't been awakened, and it probably will be awakened. That's something that I agree with. We see as he falls into the ocean, there's something with his voice, and then it's reported. I mean, maybe CP0 knows about that and reported it to the Gorosei. That's what they're discussing, that this is an indication that Luffy has awakened his fruit. That's what they're afraid of. And all it really would take here, and I know that this is kind of a reach, this is a jump, but I think that this is a reasonable one. We don't know how devil fruits actually awaken. I think that there's a general assumption, right, that the more that you use the devil fruit, eventually you will awaken it, and that might be true. But there's also the potential that some fruits are more difficult to awaken than others. I personally hope that this is true because it just adds something really interesting. One thing that I've noticed with a lot of devil fruits is that the devil fruit users share traits that are fitting with the devil fruit. Luffy is probably the best example of this. Rubber, it always bounces back, it's resilient, that's Luffy. Another awakened user that we definitely know about is Doflamingo. He has the string fruit, and he's a master manipulator behind the scenes of the entire world. Very fitting. He embodies the fruit. And so an argument can be made that the devil fruit maybe changes or alters the nature of the person, so that the person reflects what the devil fruit is. But there's also some potential that this doesn't happen, or happens more slowly, or is not always 100% accurate. And so I have it in my mind as a possibility that for a devil fruit to awaken, yes, using it more, but you have to become in tuned with the devil fruit. You have to become the devil fruit. Luffy needs to become rubber to awaken the rubber fruit. And I could imagine that personality that would embody rubber would be 1 in a million. So somebody could eat the Gomu Gomu no Mi, have it for their entire lifespans, and never awaken it because they never truly embody the fruit like Luffy would. So to interpret this with the context of the conversation that we got at the end of the chapter, basically, Luffy's underwater voice thing is related to his devil fruit. It's a sign that he has awakened his fruit. That the knowledge of this event has reached the Gorosei, and they're freaking out because this fruit hadn't awakened for centuries. The awakening of this fruit was a legend even to them. And so the big reveal this is setting up is Luffy's true awakening, where it's revealed. And so along with most of the popular theories right now, the fruit went by another name in the past, it was erased from history. Luffy's fruit is an ancient weapon. Look, in my opinion, this theory is hype, and it is totally plausible. My issues with this are the same as my issues with Toki, that I want the fruit to relate directly to the reveal at the end of the chapter being Zunisha. I think that is a little cheap, but at the same time, could Oda do it? Absolutely he could. And would I forgive him if he did? Absolutely I would. So to really break this down, because we talked about all the various ideas for what could be at the end, most of the big ones at any rate, like where do I rank them? And my number one is always going to be, or at least currently is going to be, the Dragon Devil Fruit, Kaido or Momonosuke's, because I see the direct connection to Zunisha, so it makes the Devil Fruit relate directly to Zunisha. Those things are intertwined. That's why I like that best. But as people point out, with Tama, it takes something away. Reason I don't like Tama in this place is because I don't know that the Gorosei know about Tama. I mean, they could, I guess, but that's not something that's obvious to me. So I don't think that it's Tama. Between Toki and the Gomu Gomu no Mi, I prefer the Gomu Gomu no Mi because it makes sense to me how that could be an ancient weapon, because we followed Luffy throughout the story. So there's some things here that give the idea credibility. Whereas Toki's fruit, yes, it could potentially be what they're talking about, but I don't see how the fruit is an ancient weapon, or how the fruit needs to be erased from history yet. Doesn't mean it's not possible, but I don't see it. That's why it's less. I didn't bring up any comments mentioning Zunisha being an actual ancient weapon with a special devil fruit, because I don't like those theories. And it's not to say that it can't happen, but that just doesn't jive with me, basically at all. So if that's what happens, then I will be the most wrong. That's where I stand on all these. But anyway, guys, was really excited for this comments video, so I hope you guys enjoyed it as well. As always, I'm curious as to what you guys think. You can leave comments here. I won't respond to them, but, you know, as always, we must progress the discussion. Like the video if you liked the video, dislike the video if you disliked the video, subscribe if you want to be notified for my future content, and as always, guys, have a wonderful day.